All right, Math Boot Gaming. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So, yesterday we briefly introduced how to play Texas Hold'em poker, and now that you're all professionals at it, which I'm saying in jest, of course, we're going to talk about how to really play poker. And this is, of course, where we're going to get into the math that's involved in the game of poker, again, on a very basic level. The two things I want you to be able to do is to get an idea how to understand what bluffing is and when your opponent is bluffing and when you should bluff and when you shouldn't bluff based on probability, and then also understanding the concept of an out and how that is going to affect your hand in a game of poker. There are two parts of poker. There is your odds of winning. In other words, if you have this hand, how good is that hand? Higher probability of winning. So I should say this: cards with a hands with a lower probability of happening. That's a better hand. So the idea that a straight flush is the best hand is because that's the hardest hand to get. It's the least probable to happen, and vice versa. High card, it's going to happen regardless. So getting one of those, not that big a deal. It's a really low ranking hand. So that's the first thing you have to understand. Second is you have to convince your opponent that you are going to win, and that's where bluffing comes in. So there's the actual probability of my five cards are better than your five cards. And then there's that whole, well, are your cards really better than my cards? And are your cards really better than my cards? And that's the other half of poker. Um, Now, bluffing, it sounds like fun, and it is. Bluffing is, as you can read, betting in such a way that belies what you have. In other words, you bet like you have really good cards when maybe you don't actually have really good cards. Maybe you have just okay cards. Maybe you don't have anything at all, but you're in good position at the table and you say, you know what? I'm going to act like I got aces. I don't have aces, but he doesn't know that I don't have aces. So I'm going to bet like I got aces and hope that they fold, and then you get to take the money that's already in the pot before they show their cards and say, oops, he didn't have aces. I had kings. I'd have won. Darn it. That's what bluffing is. Here is an example of it. On the board, you have two aces, a king, a two of spades, and a six of clubs. And this player over here has an ace and a king. That's a good hand. That's a good hand. That's a really good hand. That's three aces and two kings. That's a full house. That's as good a full house you can get. That's going to win you a lot of time. Meanwhile, over here, this fella or person, whoever, all they have is two. Actually, have two of spades, which is bad editing on my part. But point is, they have a pair of twos. In fact, a 7-2 that aren't in the same suit, we call that 7-2 offsuit. That's the worst hand you can have in Texas Hold'em poker. Okay, if you have this hand, you should fold because from a probability standpoint, you have the least likely chance of having a good hand. But if you are this player and they check because they're thinking, boy, I've got the best hand, but I'm going to act like I don't have the best hand because I want this person to bet more. That's also bluffing. You're trying to convince him, this player, hey, I don't have it. Do you have it? Let me check and see. See what I did there? So this player checks, even though they clearly have the best possible hand, whereas this player says, I'm going to bet, trying to convince this player that they have the best hand when they actually have the worst hand. So in this case, they're actually both bluffing. That's hard to say. You think it is. Try it. Now, right now, player one checking when they have actually really good cards, and player one opening, starting betting when they actually have really bad cards. That's bluffing. You're trying to convince the other player that you have a good probability of winning, whether you do or don't. Now, bluffing isn't really math, right? It's really more of a social deduction thing. Well, I should probably change that meme after this last week, huh? Yikes. Time changes fast. Anyway, bluffing isn't really math, but in order to understand when you should or should not bluff, that's where the math comes into play. And so you have to understand a little bit about whether or not you're going to win or not as you're in this deathly stare down on what I would like to remark as an old episode of American Idol or whatever. Anyway, um, the first part of bluffing is you need to build credit. In other words, if you're sitting at a table of players, you need to convince them that you're only going to play if you've got good cards. So you play your good hands very aggressively. If you got a three of a kind, bet, 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 bet. And if it scares people away and you don't get a lot of money, that's okay. Poker is not a game of did I win this round? It's did I win the night? We've been playing poker for 2 hours. Do I have more money now than when I got here? That's how you're trying to play poker. So you start off aggressive with your good hands and you fold your weak hands. So if you start off with an ace and a king in your little two hole cards, those two cards that nobody knows about, you should be betting those hard. Like I got good cards, I got good cards. Make everybody pay to see those cards. Bet, 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 bet. And if you have an ace and a six, same thing. You have that ace, not as good as ace and a king, but if any other aces show up, you know you've got top pair, and top pair wins a lot of games of Texas Hold'em. So you're still betting those ones pretty hard. If you have a pair of cards in your hands, like a pair of jacks, a pair of kings, a pair of tens, even a pair of sevens, even, you might think, yeah, I'm going to bet this real hard because right now with just these two cards, I know I've got a pretty good starting hand. But if I have a two and a three, I'm probably not going to win, right? To have these two cards win, I would need three other hearts to show up to have like a flush. Then I have a pretty strong hand. But even if the three hearts do show up, somebody else might have two hearts and theirs are going to be higher than mine. So I'm going to lose anyway. So if I have a weak hand, I should fold it. If I have that 7-2 that we talked about earlier, I can't make a straight. They're too far apart. They're really low numbers. They don't match the suits. I should fold these hands. When you're trying to play poker, you should start by building credit. Play these high hands aggressively. Play these low hands not at all. Get rid of them as quick as you can. Save your money for weaker hands, or for stronger hands later. That's the first part of bluffing, right? Take these high probability hands, play them hard. Low probability hands, get rid of them. Here's some ideas for stuff that you would want to raise with during those opening rounds of bets, right? All you have is your two cards. There's no cards on the table. What do you want to bet hard with? Ace high, anything, that's a good one. If you have an ace, you should bet it. You should bet pretty hard. If you have two face cards, whether they're a pair or not, you should probably bet it, right? If you have a king and a queen or a jack and a king, you should probably go ahead and bet it, right? It's a good chance that those are going to show up as strong cards, and you can at least see those first three and pay a little bit of money to do that. If you have a pair in your hand, your pocket, your hole cards, whatever you want to call it, those are good to bet with, right? Because again, at that time you're probably winning. It's pretty unlikely to get a pair, so if you get one, you're probably winning at that point. Bet it, see what happens. You also like the straight draw, which when you have two cards in a row, so 5 and a 6 or a 10 and a jack, you're now looking at, okay, well, I'm almost halfway to getting a straight, so this one would be a good one to stay in. And then also a flush draw, in other words, two cards of the same suit. If your two hole cards are both the same suit, you're in a much better position than the average player to do well with that start. Now, if things go south, right, those three cards come up and they're not helping these two, especially, get out. Get out right away. It's okay to lose that first bit of money. Save it for later when you have a better hand. Again, play good hands aggressively, but get rid of bad cards right away. And if a hand starts off good and then starts to look bad, don't be afraid to get out. You want to show your opponents, I'm playing with good cards. I'm playing with a high probability of winning. If you're playing with these hands, bet aggressively, scare away weaker hands, also increase your probability of winning. That's another good point. If you are playing with 6 people, then you have a 1 in 6 chance of winning, regardless of what your cards are, right? But if you can scare away 3 of them, well, now you have a 1 in 3 chance of winning. We talked about that with the Monty Hall problem. If I can shrink down the number of possibilities, and I'm one of them, my probability is increasing. So that's another thing to think about. This is what I was saying. I got out of order. I apologize. If your cards, you start off good and you bet hard, and then all of a sudden that flop comes up, doesn't mean you have to keep betting, right? If things look sour, right? Let's say you have a pair of 10s in your hand, and then all of a sudden 2 jacks and an ace show up. Well, now everybody has a better hand than that pair of 10s. So you might think, you know what? I might get out of this because now everybody's got a pair of jacks, and that pair of jacks would beat mine. I have 2 pair of jacks and 10s, but then there's also that ace. And I know Mr. Young said that if you have an ace, you should keep playing. So maybe one of them has an ace, and the ace would beat me. I'm going to get out. If the flop comes up, those first 3 cards show up, and it looks like my odds are not looking as good anymore, Get out. Get out. Aggression is good early on, but you got to be able to back it up because you don't want to show that you're playing weak hands because then you won't be able to bluff later. So you start off with the 2 and the 3. Looks good. Let's raise. I have a good chance of a flush. Oh no, I got 3 of the same suit. They're all the wrong suit. Now I just have the 2 and a 3. These aren't any good to me. Get out. Fold right away. Nope, no, fold, fold, fold. Get out of there right away. Okay. Now, after you have established, hey, look it, I'm playing with real cards. You've played the psychological part of the game with your math. You said, hey, if you're playing with me, I'm playing for real. Now you want to start thinking about what's called pot odds. In other words, pot odds are what are my chances of winning versus how much money it's going to cost me to keep playing. Okay. The way you do pot odds is you take your bet size divided by the pot size. In other words, how much is it going to cost versus how much do I stand to earn? So let's say the pot has $1 in it right now. And to play, I need to pay another 10 cents. We would say the pot odds is about 0.9% or about 9%. This means that if I don't have a 9% chance of winning, then I should get out because it's no longer worth it to risk it. Okay. So if this fraction comes out to 9%, I want to be able to say that I have a 9% chance of winning, roughly. Now, again, I'm simplifying the math here. There's books written about poker, just like there's books written about chess. You can go a whole lot harder on this, but more or less, if you can do a rough calculation of how much money's in there, how much money you are going to bet, do you have a better chance than that fraction, that percentage, to win the hand? If you have at least a 9% chance of winning, you should keep playing. Doesn't mean you will. It just means that the risk is now worth the reward. So here's another example. Here, the pot has $1 in it, but now it's going to cost you 30 cents to play. Now you want to say, I've got a 23% chance of winning, because otherwise it wouldn't really be worth it to risk it at that point. So that's kind of what you're thinking about. All right. This is a rough calculation. Again, when you're playing poker, I don't expect you to pull out your calculator and do this right away. The pros can do it in their head, more or less. Some with better accuracy than others, I'm sure, but that's kind of the rough idea that you want to think about. After you've done your initial good cards bet, bad cards fold, you can get a little more sophisticated and say, okay, how much does it cost me to win this hand? What are my odds of winning compared to my what it's going to cost me and what I can gain in return? Lastly, counting outs. Okay, outs are the cards that would improve your hand. Okay, let's just look at an example. We have 4 cards up on the board: King of Hearts, 6 of Clubs, 7 of Clubs, 3 of Hearts. And I have a King of Clubs and a 10 of Clubs. Okay, so I've got a couple different options with this hand for a 5th card that would make this card a lot better. Okay, right now I got a pair of Kings. It's not bad. It's worth continuing to play, but a pair of Kings could be beat by a lot of things. It could be beaten by another 6 and another 7. It could be beaten by a king and maybe a pair of aces that somebody has. There's a lot of things that could beat it. So I want to see what could improve it. Here are my outs. Here are my cards that would improve it. There are 9 cards in the deck that would give me a flush because there's 13 total clubs. I have 2 of them and 2 of them on the board. So 9 cards give me a flush. 2 cards would give me a 3 of a kind. I already have a pair of kings, and if I get a 3rd king, that's pretty good. Anything better than 2 pair, I'm feeling really good about. I'm always feeling really good about better than 2 pair. And a 3 of a kind would be sweet. And there's 2 kings. 2 of those cards would help out a lot. Now there's also 11 cards. So that means there's 11 cards that would give me a pretty solid chance of winning. These 9 cards to give me a flush, and these 2 cards to give me a 3 of a kind. Okay. And I checked, and in this example, I don't think there's any overlap there because the 2 kings would be King of Spades and King of Diamonds. And so there's no overlap with the 9 flush cards, the 9 clubs that would have to happen. Okay. So I have 11 cards out of 52, theoretically, right, minus these 6, that would help me win this hand, make my hand better. It's good to be able to do that. Now, 9 cards out of the 46 that are left, that's about a 20% chance of one of those cards showing up. And 2 cards out of the 46 left, that's about another 4% of helping me. So I have about a 24% chance that my hand is going to increase in value with this 5th card. That's what it means to count your outs. How many cards, even if I don't know how many are left, how many cards would help me get better? 9 to give me a flush, plus 2 more to give me a 3 of a kind. Those are my outs. And that's the kind of math that I want you guys to be able to do as you're playing a hand of poker. Look at the cards that are left and go, 11 cards would help me get better. Can you think about it that way? That's math through gaming. That's thinking about how to use math to improve your chances of winning. Okay? So, sub, if you could, pause the video here. Think about these 3 ideas. How do you build credit? How do you calculate pot odds roughly? How do you count your outs? I want you guys to go and play some more poker. You guys should have, half an hour, 45 minutes of class left. Get up into your groups from yesterday. Play some more poker. And then do the reflection that's on Google Classroom along with these slides if you want to review any of this, which I'd recommend. And do that reflection and talk about, okay, did I use any of these strategies? How could I use these strategies in the future? What are the implications of the math? All right, I love you guys. See you tomorrow. Thanks for watching.